What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with a bunch of Destiny 2 stuff to talk about regarding Season of the Drifter. So firstly, we're going to talk about power leveling. You may have noticed progress seems a little bit slow. This is something that Bungie have responded to. We'll talk about that, and the upcoming power level requirements for Reckoning tiers that we're going to get. We're definitely going to have to level up a little bit. We'll also talk about gear unlocks and enemies for the upcoming content, but we do have a bunch of stuff to talk about regarding exotics, upcoming rewards and details on exotic quest content, new info on what we'll need to do to unlock Invitations of the Nine, how we'll soon be working with the Spider on a pretty epic quest. We'll talk about new mods, perks, secrets, and a bunch of other stuff in this video, guys. So if you enjoy this one, a rating below very much helps me out, but otherwise let's get right into it. So first up, let's talk about power leveling. Of course, we do have a new power cap of 700, and you may have noticed if you're leveling up that generally right now, if you're doing your milestones or bounty content, stuff like that, a lot of the drops tend to be +1 power. However, some players have actually experienced issues where some of their weekly bounties and things like that, stuff from the Dreaming City for example, are actually missing and say they've already been completed. Now, both the +1 power thing and the buggy milestones is a thing that we saw back in Forsaken. Bungie actually tweeted yesterday, "We're investigating reports that players are receiving powerful rewards at a lower power than expected. Please stay tuned for updates." So there could potentially be an issue there, unless Bungie have simply retuned things. However, when it comes to stuff like Prime Engrams, the drop rates seem to be fine. Also a quick shout if you're looking for powerful drops. If you do any of the powerful forge frames for Ada this week, make sure you do them in the Baguzia Forge, because they're then able to drop +5 power every single time apparently. So probably going to be something worth running. I'll keep you posted if Bungie say anything else, but of course power level could be kind of important for some of the upcoming content. Not least the Reckonings. So currently we only have tier 1, and this is actually at 650 power. But we are getting an additional tier this week, so on Friday, Reckoning Tier 2 will open up, and this will actually have a power level requirement of 670. So definitely a pretty solid jump right there, and I'd say below 660, based on how this feels at the moment, it would definitely be pretty solid. However, when it comes to Reckoning Tier 3, it would actually have a power level requirement of 690. So it's definitely going to be a good grind to get a clear of this, so do bear that in mind. Also, another interesting thing right here, there's a triumph to complete all 3 stages of Tier 3 in the Reckoning without dying, and we can see right there the boss is the likeness of Oryx. So maybe a kind of shade of Oryx style boss, a little bit like the Taken Necromancers we've seen, so that'll certainly be interesting. But before all of that happens, you can actually get a Tier 2 drop of armor inside of Reckoning before Tier 2 launches, and that would be by completing the weekly milestone for the Reckoning, the one that you can see in the director when you hover over. It'll also be worth working towards the weekly bounty, where you get an upgraded synthesizer, as we'll need these to create the kind of mote synths inside of Reckoning Tier 2. Some potential upcoming loot right here, but there are some new mods that have been listed. So we have Boss Resist, Major Resist, and Minor Resist. Interestingly though, these are new armor mods. So considering the armor does come from Reckoning, it's entirely possible that at higher tiers we'll be able to get some of these mods dropped. But it's certainly pretty cool that they're taking those kind of major, minor, and boss perks that we get on weapons and applying some of them to armor pieces now. On top of this, there are a bunch of new weapon traits in the game. I covered some of these in a video yesterday, but you have things like Demolitionist. Kills with this weapon generate grenade energy, and activating your grenade ability reloads the weapon from reserves. That's certainly a pretty cool perk. There's also Subsistence. Kills partially reload the magazine from reserves, but reserve capacity is reduced. And 1-2 Punch. Hitting an enemy with every pellet in a shot increases melee damage for a short duration, and that is a new shotgun bonus. You'll find these and a bunch of other new perks on the Gambit weapons that you can pick up in Prime. I'll link a video down below that I made yesterday, where we break down all of the new bonuses and curated roles for Gambit Prime. Before we move away from upcoming loot though, there's been a bunch of continued conversation about Arbalest, the new linear fusion rifle. It's going to be a pretty interesting exotic. It's listed as a drop, so something that comes from an engram, but there's no proof of that happening just yet, so we're either looking at something that's time-gated, or is going to drop in a specific activity, and considering once again that Gambit Prime has a loot table, it could be that Arbalest is something that's associated with Tier 2 or 3 in the Reckoning mode. It's also worth pointing out that on top of the fact that it is listed as an exotic that just drops, there isn't any data that suggests there's an exotic quest for this weapon. Meanwhile, we can see pretty much all of the other quest stuff that we're expecting to come up in the game, so again it increases that likelihood that Arbalest is going to drop from an activity or after a certain point in time. I wanted to clarify something about a classified kinetic exotic that I spoke about yesterday. Now of course we can actually see things like Thorn in the collection. Now this isn't shown in the collection in game, but is listed as a classified weapon in the database when we look at collections. There are no files in the game for this one either, so whatever it is will need a game update before it's going to drop, and once again that probably means it's pretty likely to be linked to the free exotic quest that's on the roadmap. A quick spoiler alert right here, there is some Drifter dialogue listed in the interactions in the database where it references us sneaking into the old tower. So we can see there's gossip floating around the tower that you might have snuck into a quarantined Cryptarch vault in the ruins of the old tower. Drifter is impressed, he asks you to keep him in mind if you ever go back. So possibly that could be related to an upcoming exotic as well, but we're really going to have to wait and see. We do know about the separate arrival of Thorn though. The one thing to note on the subject of this quest would be a 660 power level mission, and that looks like the final mission for the quest, so it shouldn't be too bad to get up to around about that level. We can also see the Wishes of Sorrow ornament, which seems to perhaps give it a kind of Whisper of the Worm style effect. There are some interesting exotic items right here that are hidden, probably coming in the spring event that we're getting in a few weeks' time, but we've got the Cottontail shell right here. Nice rabbit ears, I guess, right there. Pretty interesting stuff. The Lapine shell, if that's how you say that. Once again, featuring those ears. And very interestingly here, we have the Sunshot shell. So literally the barrel of the Sunshot there with the ghost eye in the middle. And then there is the Black Peregrine. Looks like this one's going to drop in a bundle, as well as the Ladylike shell. If you want a ladybug following you around, looks like we'll be able to pick that one up in the Jubilant Engram, which will be featured in the Revelry event. Next though, we've got a little bit more information about the Invitations of the Nine. DMG actually clarified something. So Invitations of the Nine will function differently than the weekly Queen ritual. These are character based and not calendar gated. So basically, if you miss a week, you won't miss out on any unique lore or the story experience inside of that. You'll simply be able to pick that up and complete it whenever you like. So basically a new invitation will be available every week for 9 weeks, but if you do miss a week, then you won't miss out on that experience. But how you actually unlock this experience every week will be slightly different. So Xur will offer bounties that will actually get you the invitation. So there's one called Death, complete Crucible matches in Quick Play, Rumble, and competitive playlists. And then there are a bunch to defeat combatants in different strikes. So Sabathin's Song, the Garden World, the Corrupted, and a bunch of others. So basically, I don't know, Xur will have like a selection of these bounties, but when you turn the bounty in, you'll get an item called Into the Unknown. And this is essentially the token that you need to go into that activity. So you'll need to enter the activity Mystery and Potential. This will be found in the Gambit Director, and this is where we'll be able to speak with the Emissary of the Nine, pick up that weekly lore, and any other rewards that could be associated with this. But essentially, from what we know, spoiler alert right here, this will consist of a series of kind of conversations and premonitions with the Emissary of the Nine. She was actually a guardian and somebody that the Drifter knew of before she became the Emissary of the Nine, and she was known as Orin and had ties to the Awoken Queen. And interestingly, you'll remember that we did actually visit the Queen's court and she was speaking with the Emissary of the Nine, and she in fact warned us of the events that are taking place in this season. So she told us avoid falling into schemes of the Nine Guardian, so Mara has definitely known what's been coming all along, but clearly this experience will definitely consist of some new cutscenes, story dialogue, as well as collectible lore, and we've seen some of those cutscenes shown off in trailers and stuff like that. So it's going to be a very interesting experience, but hopefully that sheds a little bit more light on how it's actually going to work. Before that, next week though, of course, we'll hit the Allegiance quest. This is where we'll side either with the Vanguard or the Drifter. So the Vanguard quest is called the Investigation, and the Drifter quest will be called Honor Among Thieves. Once again, quick spoiler alert right here. We won't go into too much detail, but whichever side we pick, we'll actually end up working with the Spider. So we'll either work with him to enhance the Drifter's gambit, or to use the Spider's intelligence for the Vanguard. Basically, the Spider can be bought for a price, right? So that's going to be pretty interesting. And this is where we see a bunch of strange items that the Spider actually has in his inventory. Many of these seem to be associated with the Allegiance quest. Interestingly, there is the Executor's Key, keys to the personal quarters of a certain Executor in the last city. So I'm not sure if that'll be kind of an explorable location potentially. The Spider does also have the Midnight Special though, a convincing, though non-functional, replica of a fabled weapon, and of course that is the Galahorn. We haven't really got any further idea of what this could be for. Could be linked to the Allegiance stuff. There's also running speculation it could be kind of an April Fool's joke or something coming up. Once again, we'll have to wait and find out. The final thing I think could be worth a mention would be a brief rundown of some of the exotic changes right here. I did cover the patch notes, but just in case you're wondering about some cool weapons to try out, Two-Tailed Fox did actually get a PvE damage increase of 26%, as well as 1000 Voices. 1000 Voices got a 25% buff. It's actually doing really nicely right now. And apparently there's a glitch as well, where that 25% bonus damage is actually transferring to other energy weapons that you've got equipped at the same time. Probably something that Bungie will sort out. But Wardcliff Coil saw a massive 115% increase against boss combatants, which scales up to around about 160% against weaker combatants. So that's a massive buff to damage, and Warcliffe is actually doing really nicely right now. Projectile damage in PvE for Black Talon was buffed by 15%, so that may be something to play around with, but otherwise there was a change to Whisper of the Worm and Sleeper Simulant, which basically reduced their ammo You can now only hold 9 rounds in either of those weapons unless you have specific armor bonuses for that archetype. But otherwise, you know, some of the other buffs, Thousand Voices, Warcliffe Coil, Two-Tailed Fox as well, they're all doing pretty nicely, guys, so definitely don't sleep on them. However, for today, that is going to summarize the video, so I'll keep you posted on upcoming quest stuff when those exotics turn up. No doubt Bungie will have some news and things to talk about later on in this week at Bungie, so stay tuned here on the channel. If you enjoy the content, be sure to hit subscribe. But if you've enjoyed this video, a like below very much helps me out. Let me know what you think of Gambit Prime, any of the new gear, or the upcoming stuff. I know there's some mixed feedback on this season in general right now, and I'm kind of just taking the time to let it soak in a little bit before I give, too many opinions about that. But believe me, I've heard many of the concerns. It's definitely stuff I'm taking note of. And of course, if you have any thoughts, leave yours down below. But otherwise, guys, thanks a bunch for tuning in. And whatever you do, I hope you have an awesome day.